Translate this and this house is yours. Billionaire laughed. The maid did and his jaw dropped. You are nama lugal yurma. Itu gal la namuna dim tu. The ancient Sumerian words fell from Scarlett O'Hara's lips like liquid fire, each syllable carrying 4,000 years of buried secrets. Sebastian Carter's crystal tumbler slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor of his library as he stared at the woman he'd dismissed as just another maid for 6 months. The same woman who was now translating a priceless archaeological document he'd paid experts $50,000 to decode. What the hell? Sebastian's voice cracked, actually cracked, for the first time since he'd built his billion-dollar empire. His emerald eyes locked onto hers with predatory intensity as the impossible realization hit him. His cleaning lady wasn't who she pretended to be. And the joke he'd made 30 seconds ago, translate this and the house is yours, suddenly wasn't funny anymore. Because she'd just done exactly that. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another heart-stirring story that's about to blow your mind. I'm so excited you're here with me today. Where are you watching from? Drop the name of the city you are watching from in the comments below. And how are you doing? Is your heart ready for a story about secrets, impossible love, and the moment everything changes with just a few whispered words? If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this incredible journey. Now, let me take you back to how we got to this earth-shattering moment. The morning had started like any other in the Pemberton estate. Scarlett moved through Sebastian's world like a ghost, polishing surfaces that already gleamed, dusting artifacts worth more than most people's houses. For 6 months, she'd perfected the art of invisibility. Just another piece of hired help in a mansion that housed enough wealth to fund small countries. But invisibility required sacrifice. It meant watching Sebastian conduct business calls in 7 different languages while she pretended not to understand a word. It meant seeing priceless historical documents scattered across his desk while acting like they were meaningless paper. It meant burying Dr. Charlotte Everhart, the woman with a doctorate in ancient languages, so completely that sometimes she forgot she'd ever existed. Until this morning, when Sebastian Carter made a joke that changed everything. Translate this document for me, he'd said with that trademark smirk, gesturing at the Sumerian contract on his desk. And this house is yours. He'd been mocking her, testing her, playing with the hired help because billionaires got bored and maids were expendable entertainment. But Scarlett O'Hara was tired of being invisible. Tired of watching her father waste away in a hospital bed while she scrubbed floors instead of using her brilliant mind. Tired of pretending to be less than she was while the solution to every problem sat right there on his desk, written in symbols she could read as easily as English. So she'd whispered the translation that would shatter both their worlds. Now Sebastian stood frozen behind his mahogany desk, expensive suit wrinkled from their morning's work, his usual mask of controlled arrogance replaced by something she'd never seen before, vulnerability. Raw, unfiltered shock that made him look almost human. Who are you? His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an avalanche. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. There was no going back now. No more hiding behind false names and forged references. The truth hung between them like a loaded gun, and she was the only one who could pull the trigger. But as their eyes met across the space that separated servant from master, rich from poor, truth from lies, she saw something else flickering in those emerald depths. Something that looked dangerously like fascination. The maid's secret is out, but Sebastian's reaction is about to turn both their worlds upside down. What happens when a joke becomes a promise, and a billionaire realizes he's been blind to what was right in front of him all along? The silence stretched between them like a chasm filled with 6 months of careful deceptions. Scarlett's hands trembled as she watched Sebastian process what had just happened. His joke transformed into reality by a woman who wasn't supposed to exist. Dr. Charlotte Everhart. The name escaped her lips like a confession. That's who I really am. Sebastian's eyebrows shot up. Doctor? Ancient Languages and Civilizations. PhD from Columbia. Each word felt like shedding skin she'd worn too long. Specialization in Mesopotamian scripts, with published papers on Sumerian legal documentation. She gestured toward the parchment on his desk. That contract? It's a land deed from the 3rd dynasty of Ur. King Ur-Nammu granting temple construction rights to his chief architect. Sebastian sank into his leather chair, running a hand through his dark hair. A doctorate. Jesus Christ. He looked up at her with new eyes, really seeing her for the first time. "What the hell are you doing scrubbing my floors?" The question she'd dreaded for 6 months hung in the air. Scarlett closed her eyes, remembering the phone call that had destroyed her old life. Her father's voice weak and scared. "Charlotte, honey, I need to tell you something about the medical bills. My father has stage 4 pancreatic cancer," she said quietly. "The treatments aren't covered by insurance. Experimental drugs, specialized care. It's costing us everything." Her voice cracked. "I lost my teaching position when I couldn't focus on work anymore. Kept missing classes, failing students who deserved better. Academic jobs don't wait for personal crises." Sebastian's expression shifted. The calculating businessman facade cracked, revealing something unexpectedly human underneath. "How much do you need?" 200,000. Maybe more. The number felt impossible, even saying it aloud. "I've been working 3 jobs, but it's like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. This position here pays better than most, even though..." She gestured at her maid's uniform. "Even though you're the most overqualified cleaning lady in Manhattan." Despite everything, Scarlett almost smiled. "I forged my references. Created a fake identity." Scarlett O'Hara seemed like the kind of name someone would remember, but not investigate too closely. "Gone with the Wind," Sebastian murmured. "You chose the name of literature's most famous survivor." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that they were both people who did whatever it took to protect what mattered most. "What about you?" Scarlett found herself asking. "Why do you live alone in a mansion that could house 50 families?" Sebastian's mask slipped back into place, so quickly she almost missed the vulnerability that had been there moments before. "I don't do personal questions from the staff. I'm not staff anymore, remember? You offered me the house. That was a joke." "Was it?" She stepped closer to his desk, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like Sebastian Carter doesn't make promises he can't keep." For a moment, she thought he might retreat behind his billionaire armor. Instead, he surprised her by laughing. A real laugh, not the calculated corporate chuckle she'd heard him use on phone calls. "You want to know about me, Dr. Everhart? I built this empire from nothing because I learned early that people leave. Everyone leaves, eventually. Investors, business partners, lovers. They all have a price point where loyalty becomes negotiable." He gestured around the opulent library. "This house, this wealth, it's not about luxury. It's about never being vulnerable enough to lose what matters again." "What did you lose?" Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Everything. When I was 17, my father's construction company went bankrupt. We lost our house, our family restaurant, everything my grandparents had built after they immigrated from Sicily. My parents..." He paused, old pain flickering across his features. "My parents didn't survive the shame. Heart attack and a bottle of sleeping pills, 6 months apart." Scarlett's breath caught. "Sebastian, I swore I'd never be helpless like that again. Never depend on anyone else's mercy or goodwill." His eyes found hers. "So I built an empire where I control everything and need no one. But you're alone. Alone is safe." The words hung between them, heavy with years of careful isolation. Scarlett understood that kind of protective loneliness. The way survival could become a cage that kept out both danger and joy. "The Sumerian contract," she said softly. "What were you really doing with it?" Sebastian's expression shifted, becoming almost sheepish. "I collect ancient documents about beginnings. Founding of cities, establishment of laws, creation of dynasties. Maybe it's narcissistic, but I like reading about other people who built something from nothing." "That's not narcissistic. That's..." She searched for the right word. "Human." Something in his eyes warmed at that, and Scarlett felt a dangerous flutter in her chest. This was not supposed to happen. She was not supposed to see past the billionaire facade to the lonely man underneath. She was certainly not supposed to feel drawn to him like a moth to flame. "The house," Sebastian said suddenly. "I meant it." Scarlett blinked. "What?" "The offer. You translated the document. The house is yours if you want it." He leaned forward, his voice growing intense. "But I have a counter-proposal." Her heart hammered. "I'm listening. Stay. Not as my maid, as my translator. I'll pay you 50,000 per document, same as I was paying that hack from the university. You'll have your own office, your own projects." His green eyes locked onto hers. "You'll have the resources to save your father and rebuild the career you lost." It was everything she needed. Everything she'd dreamed of during 6 months of invisible servitude. So why did it feel like stepping into a beautiful trap? There's a catch, she said. It wasn't a question. Sebastian's smile was sharp as a blade. There's always a catch, Dr. Everhart. The catch is that I think you're the most fascinating woman I've met in 10 years, and I'm not entirely sure I can trust myself around you. The admission hit her like lightning. Raw, honest, dangerous. Sebastian, think about it. He stood, moving around the desk until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive and masculine and entirely too appealing. You need what I can give you. And maybe I need what you can give me too. Which is? Someone who sees past the money to the man underneath. Someone who's not afraid to challenge me. His voice dropped to a whisper. Someone who's brilliant enough to match me step for step. Scarlett's breath caught as he reached out, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. The touch was feather-light, but it ignited something deep in her chest that she'd thought was dead. This is insane, she whispered. The best things usually are. Before she could respond, Sebastian's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The spell broke as reality crashed back in. He was her employer, she was his employee, and the distance between their worlds was measured in billions of dollars. But as he answered the phone and she turned to leave, Scarlett caught him watching her in the reflection of the window. His eyes held a hunger that had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with the woman who'd just turned his carefully controlled world upside down. The game had changed. The question was, were they both brave enough to play? 3 days later, Scarlett stood in what had once been Sebastian's storage room, now transformed into the most beautiful office she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with ancient texts and historical documents. A mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, its surface already covered with translation projects that made her academic heart sing. But it was the small touches that stole her breath. Fresh orchids by the window, a state-of-the-art computer system, even a coffee maker that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Do you approve? Sebastian's voice came from the doorway, and she turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. It's perfect, she said honestly. Too perfect. This must have cost. Don't. He held up a hand. Rule number 1 of working for me. Never question how I spend my money. I have more than I could use in 10 lifetimes. That's not why I. Rule number 2, he continued, stepping into the room. We maintain professional boundaries. What happened the other day, that moment of attraction, we're going to pretend it never happened. Scarlett's heart sank, though she told herself it was for the best. Of course. Good. But his eyes lingered on her face longer than necessary. Your first project is on the desk. A series of Babylonian contracts I acquired from a private collector. I need them translated and authenticated by the end of the week. She moved to the desk, her excitement building as she examined the documents. These are incredible. Some of them look like they might be from Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Miss O'Hara? They both turned as a crisp voice cut through the room. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of beauty that graced magazine covers. Her designer dress probably cost more than Scarlett's entire wardrobe, and the massive diamond on her left ring finger caught the light like captured stars. Vivian, Sebastian said, his voice carefully neutral. I wasn't expecting you. Vivian Lee swept into the room with predatory grace, her calculating blue eyes taking in every detail. The transformed office, Scarlett's professional attire, the obvious investment Sebastian had made in this new arrangement. Darling, you've been avoiding my calls. Vivian's voice carried a slight southern accent that somehow made everything sound like a weapon. When your assistant said you were in meetings, I decided to come see for myself what was so important. She stopped beside Sebastian, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. And who might this be? Dr. Charlotte Everhart, Sebastian said before Scarlett could answer. My new translator and historical consultant. Charlotte, this is Vivian Lee, my fiancée. The word hit Scarlett like a physical blow. Fiancé. Of course. Men like Sebastian didn't stay single. They collected beautiful accessories to match their beautiful lives. How fascinating, Vivian purred, her eyes never leaving Scarlett's face. A doctor who works with dusty old papers. How academic. The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Scarlett straightened, her academic pride flaring. Actually, these dusty old papers are some of the most significant historical documents from ancient Mesopotamia. They provide insight into legal and social structures that influenced civilization for thousands of years. How wonderful for you. Vivian's smile was sharp as a blade. Sebastian, darling, we need to discuss the engagement party. The Hamptons' house is booked for next weekend, and I need to finalize the guest list. Engagement party. The words twisted in Scarlett's stomach like a knife. She'd been fooling herself, reading meaning into moments that had been nothing more than a lonely billionaire's temporary fascination with something new. We'll discuss it later, Sebastian said, his voice tight. I'm in the middle of. Oh, but surely Dr. Everhart won't mind if we borrow you for just a moment? Vivian's tone was sweet as poisoned honey. After all, family comes first. Isn't that right, Doctor? The challenge hung in the air. Scarlett met Vivian's cold blue gaze and recognized a fellow survivor. Someone who'd learned to fight for what she wanted and eliminate threats before they became problems. Of course, Scarlett said smoothly. I have plenty of work to keep me busy. She turned back to the Babylonian contracts, effectively dismissing them both. But she could feel Vivian's eyes boring into her back, calculating, measuring, planning. Lovely meeting you, Vivian called as Sebastian reluctantly allowed her to pull him from the room. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other. The threat was barely veiled. Scarlett waited until their footsteps faded before sinking into her chair, her hands shaking as the reality hit her. Sebastian was engaged. To a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of Vogue and probably had a trust fund larger than some country's GDP. What had she been thinking, imagining there could be something between them? She was the help, educated help, well-paid help, but still just an employee. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Dad's having a good day. Asking about you. When can you visit? The reminder of why she was here steadied her. This wasn't about Sebastian or impossible attractions or billionaire fairy tales. This was about saving her father's life. Everything else was just noise. But as she tried to focus on the ancient cuneiform symbols, she couldn't shake the memory of Sebastian's fingers grazing her cheek, or the way he'd looked at her like she was the most fascinating puzzle he'd ever encountered. Professional boundaries. That's what he'd said. So why did it feel like the most important battle of her life was just beginning? 2 hours later, Scarlett was deep in translation when Sebastian appeared in her doorway. Alone. Where's your fiancé? She asked without looking up from her work. Gone. Finally. His voice carried a weariness that made her glance up. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and he looked like a man who'd just survived an interrogation. Trouble in paradise? Sebastian laughed, but there was no humor in it. You could say that. He moved into the room, stopping beside her desk. I owe you an apology. For what? For not warning you about Vivian. For letting her ambush you like that. His green eyes were serious. She can be territorial. She's your fiancé. She has a right to be territorial. Does she? Sebastian's voice was quiet, but there was something dangerous in it. What if I told you the engagement was more business arrangement than love story? Scarlett's heart skipped. I'd say that's none of my business. But what if I wanted it to be your business? The question hung between them like a bridge over a chasm, dangerous to cross, impossible to ignore. Sebastian, she began. I know what I said about professional boundaries. But seeing Vivian here, watching her try to diminish you. His jaw tightened. It made me realize something. What? That maybe some rules are meant to be broken. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with the scent of his cologne and the echo of words that changed everything. Outside her office window, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Scarlett couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the center of a hurricane that was about to tear through all their carefully constructed lives. The real question was, when the storm hit, would any of them survive with their hearts intact? The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that was both torturous and intoxicating. Scarlett threw herself into her translation work with desperate focus, producing results that even Sebastian's usual stoic mask couldn't hide his admiration for. She'd authenticated 3 Babylonian contracts, decoded a series of Sumerian agricultural records, and identified what appeared to be a previously unknown correspondence between ancient trade houses. But it was the stolen moments between professional interactions that were slowly driving her insane. The way Sebastian lingered in her office doorway during his morning coffee, asking questions about her work that went deeper than mere curiosity. The brush of his fingers when he handed her new documents. The intensity in his green eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. And then there was Vivian. Sebastian's fiancée had made it her mission to drop by the estate at least twice a week, always with some urgent wedding detail that required immediate attention. She was unfailingly polite to Scarlett, the kind of politeness that felt like being slowly flayed alive. Dr. Everhart, Vivian purred from the doorway of Scarlett's office. Working late again? Scarlett glanced up from the cuneiform tablet she'd been photographing. The afternoon light slanted through her windows, golden and warm, but Vivian's presence seemed to chill the air by several degrees. The work doesn't stop for business hours, Scarlett replied evenly. How admirable. Vivian stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Sebastian speaks so highly of your dedication. He says you're quite brilliant with those ancient languages. I do my best. I'm sure you do. Vivian paused beside the desk, her manicured fingers trailing across one of the reference books. You know, I was a linguistics major myself back at Vassar. French and Italian, of course, more practical for someone in my social circle. The implication was clear. Practical languages for practical people, not obscure ancient scripts for academic dreamers. That must be useful for your work, Scarlett said diplomatically. Oh, I don't work. Sebastian prefers that I focus on our social obligations. Charity galas, political fundraisers, maintaining the right connections. Vivian's smile was razor-sharp. It's a full-time job, really, being the right kind of wife for a man in his position. Wife. Not fiancée anymore, but wife. As if it was already decided, already done. I'm sure it is, Scarlett managed. Which is why I wanted to talk to you, actually. Vivian perched on the edge of the desk, her proximity feeling like a calculated invasion. About boundaries. Scarlett's blood chilled. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, I think you do. Vivian's voice remained sweet, but her blue eyes were arctic. Sebastian is, how should I put this, susceptible to intellectual fascination. He finds brilliant women intriguing in an academic sense. But fascination fades, Dr. Everhart. It always does. Mrs. Lee. Miss, actually. I haven't taken his name yet. Vivian's smile widened. But I will be very soon. Sebastian and I have been together for 3 years. We understand each other. We come from the same world, share the same goals, move in the same circles. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You're a temporary distraction. A bright, shiny object that caught his attention. But when this little infatuation runs its course, and it will, I'll still be here. I'll still be the woman who fits into his life. Scarlett forced herself to meet Vivian's gaze steadily. I think you're overestimating my impact on Sebastian's life. I'm his employee, nothing more. Am I? Vivian straightened, smoothing down her designer skirt. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Sebastian has been spending an awful lot of time down here in your little office. Asking about your work, bringing you coffee personally instead of having the kitchen staff do it. Even rearranging his schedule to accommodate your research needs. Each observation hit like a physical blow because they were all true. Scarlett had noticed these things too, had allowed herself to hope they meant something more than professional courtesy. Sebastian is invested in the quality of my work, she said carefully. Sebastian is invested in you. Vivian's voice carried a note of genuine frustration now, the polite mask slipping slightly. And that's a problem for both of us. How do you figure? Because you're going to get hurt. For a moment, Vivian's expression softened into something that might have been sympathy. Do you really think this ends well for you? He's worth $3 billion, Dr. Everhart. His social calendar is booked 2 years in advance. His business decisions affect thousands of jobs and millions in revenue. You think he's going to throw all that away for a maid with a PhD? The words stung because they voiced Scarlett's own deepest fears. The ones she tried to ignore during those stolen moments when Sebastian looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. I never said. You didn't have to. Vivian's voice was almost gentle now. I can see it in your eyes. The hope. The what if. The fantasy that maybe, just maybe, love conquers all. She shook her head sadly. Fairy tales are for children, Dr. Everhart. Sebastian needs someone who can stand beside him in his world, not someone he has to lift up to reach it. The door chimed softly, and both women turned to see Sebastian himself entering the office. He was dressed for business, charcoal suit, silk tie, the armor of corporate warfare. But his eyes went immediately to Scarlett, and she saw something flicker there when he noticed Vivian's presence. Ladies, he said carefully. Am I interrupting something? Not at all, darling. Vivian rose from the desk with fluid grace, moving to Sebastian's side and placing a proprietary hand on his arm. I was just getting to know your brilliant translator a bit better. We were discussing the fascinating world of ancient languages, weren't we, Dr. Everhart? Fascinating, Scarlett echoed hollowly. Sebastian's eyes narrowed slightly, some invisible communication passing between him and Vivian that Scarlett couldn't decode. I need to speak with Dr. Everhart about the Mesopotamian collection. Privately. Of course. Vivian pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, leaving a faint lipstick mark that she didn't bother to wipe away. I'll see you tonight, darling. Don't forget we have dinner with the Ashfords. She glided toward the door, pausing only to look back at Scarlett. Lovely chatting with you, Dr. Everhart. I do hope we'll have another opportunity soon. The threat was wrapped in silk and tied with a bow, but it was unmistakable. When the door closed behind her, silence filled the office like smoke. Sebastian remained standing near the entrance, his expression unreadable. What did she say to you? He asked finally. Nothing important. Scarlett. Her name on his lips was a command and a plea at the same time. What did she say? She looked up at him, this powerful, complicated man who'd somehow become the center of her universe in just 2 weeks. Vivian was right about one thing. This couldn't end well. The distance between their worlds was too vast, the obstacles too numerous. But looking at Sebastian now, seeing the concern in his green eyes, the way his hands clenched slightly at his sides, as if he was restraining himself from crossing the room to her. She reminded me that fairy tales aren't real, Scarlett said quietly. Sebastian's expression darkened. And what do you think? The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities and weighted with consequences. Scarlett knew the smart answer, the safe answer, the answer that would protect her heart from inevitable destruction. Instead, she found herself saying, I think some stories are worth the risk, even if they don't have happy endings. Something shifted in Sebastian's eyes, surprise, hunger, something that looked dangerously like hope. He started toward her desk, and Scarlett's heart hammered as she realized the professional boundaries they'd been so carefully maintaining were about to shatter completely. But just as he reached her, his phone buzzed with an urgent tone that made him stop and check the display. Shit, he muttered. The Tokyo deal is falling apart. I have to go, Scarlett said, understanding even as disappointment crashed over her. I'll be here. He hesitated at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. This conversation isn't over. I know. After he left, Scarlett sat in the golden afternoon light, Vivian's words echoing in her mind. Fairy tales are for children. Maybe that was true. Maybe she was deluding herself about what was growing between her and Sebastian. But as she touched the cuneiform tablet on her desk, 4,000 years old, a love letter from a Sumerian merchant to his wife, she couldn't help thinking that some stories were worth preserving, no matter how impossible they seemed. Even if they broke your heart in the process. The charity gala was in full swing by the time Scarlett arrived, having spent the afternoon debating whether she should attend at all. Sebastian had mentioned it casually 3 days ago. There's a fundraiser for childhood literacy on Saturday. You should come. Network with some museum curators, auction house experts. Good for your career. But standing in the marble foyer of the Metropolitan Club, surrounded by Manhattan's elite in their designer gowns and tuxedos, Scarlett felt like an imposter. Her simple black dress, the nicest thing in her wardrobe, suddenly seemed shabby among all the couture and jewelry that probably cost more than her father's medical bills. Dr. Everhart. She turned to see Dr. Harrison Kane approaching, champagne flute in hand. She recognized him from academic conferences, a pretentious but brilliant archaeologist who worked for the Whitney Museum. Harrison, she smiled, grateful to see a familiar face. I didn't know you'd be here. Sebastian Carter is one of our major donors. When he calls, we come running. Harrison's eyes swept over the opulent ballroom appreciatively. Though I have to admit, I was surprised to hear you were working for him now. Last I heard, you disappeared from academia entirely. Heat crept up Scarlett's neck. I needed a change of pace. Well, you've certainly landed in an interesting position. Carter's private collection is legendary. Most of us would kill for access to what he's got locked away in that mansion of his. They chatted about her recent translations, and Scarlett found herself relaxing slightly as they fell into familiar academic territory. But her attention kept drifting across the ballroom, searching for Sebastian among the crowd of beautiful people. She found him near the auction display, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, Vivian draped on his arm like a perfectly matched accessory. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease, the kind of couple that graced society pages and charity event programs. They make a striking pair, don't they? Harrison followed her gaze. Word is they'll be announcing the wedding date tonight. Scarlett's champagne suddenly tasted like ash. Tonight. That's the rumor. Though, Harrison leaned closer conspiratorially. There are whispers that all isn't well in paradise. Some of Carter's business associates think Vivian's family connections are more valuable to him than romance. Before Scarlett could respond, the crowd around them shifted, and suddenly Sebastian was there, appearing at her side as if summoned by some invisible force. Dr. Everhart, he said formally, but his green eyes burned with something far from professional. You came. You invited me, she replied, hyper-aware of the way every conversation around them had quieted slightly, heads turning to assess this new dynamic. Sebastian, darling. Vivian materialized beside him, her smile bright as a blade. You didn't tell me Dr. Everhart would be joining us tonight. I mentioned she might attend, Sebastian said carefully. How wonderful. Vivian's gaze swept over Scarlett's simple dress with the precision of a laser sight. You look lovely, Dr. Everhart. So understated. The backhanded compliment hit its mark, but before Scarlett could respond, Harrison jumped into the conversation. Actually, Sebastian, I was hoping to discuss Dr. Everhart's work with your Mesopotamian collection. The Whitney would be very interested in collaborating on an exhibition. That's not possible, Sebastian said flatly. Dr. Everhart's research is proprietary. But surely. Proprietary, Sebastian repeated, his voice carrying the kind of finality that had built empires. Harrison retreated with wounded dignity, muttering something about private collectors hoarding history. But Scarlett barely noticed, too focused on the possessive edge in Sebastian's voice when he'd claimed her work. If you'll excuse me, Vivian said sweetly. I see the Vanderbilts have arrived. Must go say hello. She pressed another kiss to Sebastian's cheek, this one lingering longer than necessary. Don't wander too far, darling. The announcement is in 20 minutes. Announcement. The wedding date Harrison had mentioned. Scarlett's stomach twisted as Vivian glided away, every inch the perfect society wife. Dance with me, Sebastian said suddenly. What? Dance with me. His hand was already extended toward her, an invitation and a command rolled into one. Please. She should say no. Should maintain the professional distance they'd been pretending existed. Should not give the Manhattan elite more gossip about Sebastian Carter and his mysterious translator. Instead, she placed her hand in his. The dance floor was crowded, but Sebastian guided her to a relatively quiet corner where the shadows provided some illusion of privacy. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic, and when his arms came around her, Scarlett felt like she was stepping into a dream that was bound to become a nightmare. You look beautiful, he murmured against her ear, his breath warm and intimate. Sebastian, don't. Don't what? Don't say things you don't mean. Don't make this harder than it already is. His arms tightened around her slightly. Who says I don't mean it? She pulled back to look at his face, searching for the truth in those green eyes. Your fiancé is about to announce your wedding date. In front of 500 people. Something flickered across his expression. Pain, frustration, something that looked almost like desperation. What if I told you that engagement was a mistake? I'd say it's a very expensive mistake to fix. Money isn't everything, Scarlett. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Easy to say when you have billions of it. You think this is about money? His voice was tight with something that might have been anger. You think I care about Vivian's trust fund or her family's social connections? Don't you? Instead of answering, Sebastian spun her deeper into the shadows at the edge of the dance floor, where the music was softer and the crowd couldn't see them as clearly. The engagement happened 3 years ago, he said quietly. A business merger disguised as romance. Her father's investment firm, my construction empire. It made sense on paper. And now I've met someone who makes me forget why I thought sense mattered more than feeling. The words hit her like lightning. Dangerous, electric, potentially devastating. Sebastian, I know it's impossible. I know the obstacles. Do you? She pulled away from him slightly, needing distance to think clearly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want to have your cake and eat it too. Keep the perfect society fiancé and the brilliant mistress tucked away in your private office. His jaw tightened. That's not, isn't it? The words came out sharper than she'd intended, months of frustration and impossible longing finally breaking free. You talk about feeling, about connection, but you've never once mentioned actually changing anything. Never talked about ending your engagement or choosing something real over something convenient. You don't understand the complexities. No, I understand perfectly. Scarlett stepped back from him entirely now, the spell of the dance broken. I understand that I'm the most overqualified distraction you've ever encountered. But distractions end, Sebastian. And when they do, you'll still have your perfect life with your perfect wife, and I'll still be the woman who was foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. She turned to walk away, but his hand caught her wrist. Don't, he said urgently. Don't walk away from this. From us. There is no us. But even as she said it, she could feel her resolve wavering at the desperate honesty in his voice. There could be. How? Tell me how this works, Sebastian. Because I can't see a path from here to anything that doesn't end in disaster. For a moment, she thought he might actually have an answer. His green eyes burned with intensity, his jaw set with determination that had conquered business rivals and built impossible dreams. Then the lights dimmed, and a voice over the sound system called for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for a special announcement. Vivian appeared on the small stage at the front of the ballroom, radiant in her designer gown, the microphone in her hand gleaming like a weapon. Thank you all for being here tonight for such a worthy cause. But I have some personal news that I simply couldn't wait to share with all our dear friends. Sebastian's hand was still on Scarlett's wrist, and she felt his grip tighten involuntarily. Sebastian Carter and I are thrilled to announce that we've set our wedding date. June 15th, at the family estate in the Hamptons. You're all invited to celebrate the beginning of our new chapter together. The ballroom erupted in applause and congratulations. Glasses clinked, people pressed forward to offer their best wishes, and photographers materialized to capture the moment for society pages. Through it all, Sebastian stood frozen beside Scarlett, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Congratulations, Scarlett said quietly, her voice steady despite the way her heart was shattering. I hope you'll be very happy together. This time when she walked away, he didn't try to stop her. But as she made her way toward the exit, weaving through the crowd of celebrating elite, she heard her name called from behind. Dr. Everhart. Wait! She turned to see Sebastian pushing through the crowd, his tuxedo slightly disheveled, his green eyes wild with something that looked like panic. That wasn't supposed to happen, he said when he reached her. I didn't know she was going to. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Christ, Scarlett, it matters more than anything. The desperation in his voice stopped her cold. Around them, the celebration continued, but they stood in a bubble of tense silence. She set the date without consulting you, Scarlett said, understanding. She set the date without consulting you, Scarlett said, understanding flooding through her like ice water. This was a power play. Sebastian's expression was thunderous. She knows. About us. About how I feel about you. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. This was her way of forcing my hand, making it public so I can't back out without causing a scandal that would destroy both our families' reputations. And would you? The question escaped before Scarlett could stop it. Back out. For a heartbeat, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Sebastian's green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her forget they were surrounded by 500 of Manhattan's most powerful people. Yes, he whispered. For you I would. The words hit her like a tsunami, washing away every rational thought, every carefully constructed barrier she'd built around her heart. Sebastian, I love you. The admission came out raw and desperate. I love your brilliant mind and your stubborn pride, and the way you make ancient languages sound like poetry. I love that you see through all the money and power to the man underneath. I love that you're brave enough to challenge me and strong enough to walk away when I'm being an ass. Tears burned behind Scarlett's eyes. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. And I know I'm asking you to take an impossible leap of faith with me. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining like they were meant to fit together. But I also know that what we have is worth fighting for. The scandal alone would. Would what? Cost me money? Damage my reputation? Sebastian's laugh was harsh. Scarlett, I've spent the last 15 years building an empire to protect myself from ever being vulnerable again. But you make me want to tear it all down if it means keeping you. Before she could respond, Vivian's voice cut through the moment like a blade. There you are, darling. She appeared beside them in a swirl of silk and fury barely concealed beneath her radiant smile. Our guests are asking for the happy couple. We really shouldn't keep them waiting. Her eyes locked onto their joined hands, and something cold and calculating flickered in her blue gaze. Of course, Sebastian said, his voice carefully neutral as he released Scarlett's fingers. We wouldn't want to disappoint our guests. But as Vivian led him away toward the crowd of well-wishers, Sebastian looked back over his shoulder at Scarlett. The message in his eyes was unmistakable. This isn't over. Scarlett stood alone in the shadows, her heart racing and her mind reeling. Around her, Manhattan's elite continued their celebration, oblivious to the fact that their world had just shifted on its axis. She should leave, should go home, pack her things, and disappear before this impossible situation destroyed them all. Instead, she found herself thinking about the Sumerian love letter on her desk, 4,000 years old, a testament to passion that had survived empires and outlasted dynasties. Some stories, she realized, were worth preserving no matter how dangerous they were to tell. The next morning, Scarlett arrived at the estate to find her office emptied. Every book, every document, every piece of equipment gone. The mahogany desk sat bare under the morning light, looking as abandoned as she felt. Even the orchids by the window had been removed, leaving behind only the faint scent of their perfume and the ghost of what had been. I'm sorry, miss. Maria, one of the housekeeping staff, appeared in the doorway with sympathetic eyes. Mr. Carter's orders. Everything was moved to storage this morning. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. Did he say why? Miss Lee was here early. There was discussion. Very loud discussion. Maria's expression was carefully neutral, but her meaning was clear. Mr. Carter left for his office in the city afterward. Haven't seen him since. Scarlett sank into the empty chair, the reality hitting her like a physical blow. Whatever Sebastian had felt the night before, whatever promises he'd made in the heat of the moment, the cold light of day had brought different counsel. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Pack your things. Car will arrive at noon to take you to the airport. Your severance and a bonus have been deposited in your account. This is for the best. Vivian. Of course. The woman who fought for what she wanted with the precision of a surgical strike. A second text arrived immediately after. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. He'll forget you within a month. They always do. Scarlett stared at the messages until the words blurred. She should be grateful, she told herself. A clean exit, enough money to help her father, and the chance to rebuild her academic career with Sebastian's letters of recommendation. It was everything she'd originally wanted. So why did it feel like her world was ending? She was still sitting in the empty office when Sebastian's voice echoed through the house, sharp with fury. Where the hell is she? Footsteps pounded up the stairs, expensive shoes moving with purpose and barely controlled rage. Sebastian appeared in her doorway moments later, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His tie was gone, his shirt wrinkled, and his green eyes blazed with something that looked like panic. Thank God, he breathed when he saw her. When I got to my office and saw the contracts to terminate your employment. You signed them, Scarlett said quietly. Maria said everything was moved this morning. I didn't sign anything. Sebastian moved into the room, his gaze taking in the empty shelves and bare surfaces. Vivian forged my signature. She had the legal authority as my fiancée to make household decisions in my absence. Your fiancée, Scarlett repeated. The woman you're marrying in June. Sebastian's jaw tightened. The woman I'm not marrying at all. The words hung between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Sebastian. I broke it off. His voice was rough with exhaustion and something that might have been relief. This morning, after the party, after what she pulled with that announcement, I realized I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't pretend that what I felt for you was just infatuation, or that marrying Vivian was anything more than emotional cowardice. Scarlett's heart stopped. You ended your engagement? Messily. Publicly. Expensively. Sebastian's smile was grim. Vivian's father is threatening lawsuits. Half my board thinks I've lost my mind. The other half is calculating how much this will cost the company in lost investment opportunities. Oh God, Sebastian. Your business will survive. It always does. He crossed the room, stopping just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of the decision he'd made. But I won't survive losing you. You don't understand what you've done. Scarlett stood, her hands shaking. The scandal, the financial implications, are worth it. Every penny, every headline, every disapproving look from people whose opinions I used to care about. His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. You are worth all of it. I'm not worth your empire, Sebastian. You're worth more. The simple declaration broke something loose in her chest. Tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over, and Sebastian pulled her against him, his arms strong and sure around her. "We can't do this," she whispered against his chest. "The damage to your reputation, your business relationships, will heal. Or they won't, and I'll build something new." His voice was certain, implacable. "But I won't spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to choose love over convenience." Scarlett pulled back to look at his face, searching for any sign of doubt or regret. Instead, she found only determination and something that looked like peace, as if ending his engagement had lifted a weight he'd been carrying for years. "Vivian was right about one thing," she said softly. "We come from different worlds. Then we'll build a new one. Together." The promise was beautiful and terrifying and completely impossible. And absolutely everything she wanted. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Her mother's number flashed on the screen, and cold dread washed through her. "Mom," she answered, Sebastian's arms still around her. "Charlotte, honey, you need to come home." Her mother's voice was thick with tears. "It's your father. The doctors, they say it's time." The world tilted sideways. Scarlett's knees buckled, and only Sebastian's strong arms kept her upright. "How long?" she whispered. "Days. Maybe less." Her mother's sob broke through the phone. "I'm so sorry, baby. The experimental treatment isn't working. They've done everything they can." Sebastian was already reaching for his phone before Scarlett ended the call. "Charter jet to Kansas City," he said into the device. "Immediate departure. And I want the best oncologist money can buy on standby." "Sebastian, no." "Yes." His voice brooked no argument. "Whatever it costs, whatever needs to be done. We're not giving up. It's too late." The doctor said. "The doctors here might have different options. Treatments that aren't available in Kansas." Sebastian's eyes blazed with fierce determination. "We don't quit, Scarlett. Not on your father, not on us. We fight." As he made call after call, arranging flights, consulting with specialists, moving mountains with the same ruthless efficiency he brought to billion-dollar deals, Scarlett realized something that made her heart ache with love and terror in equal measure. This was what Sebastian Carter looked like when he decided to fight for something that mattered. The question was whether love would be enough to win a war against time, distance, and forces too powerful for even billions of dollars to control. But as she watched him command armies of doctors and specialists with nothing but the fierce desire to save her father, Scarlett began to believe that maybe, just maybe, some fairy tales were worth the impossible odds. Even if they broke your heart trying to make them real. The private medical facility Sebastian had arranged was unlike anything Scarlett had ever seen. All glass and steel and cutting-edge technology that hummed with quiet efficiency. Within 6 hours of her mother's phone call, her father had been transferred from the small Kansas hospital to this temple of modern medicine, where teams of specialists were already reviewing his case. "The tumors are aggressive," Dr. Elizabeth Hayes explained, her voice gentle but direct as she reviewed the scans with Scarlett and Sebastian in the consultation room. "But not untreatable. There's an experimental immunotherapy protocol that wasn't available at your father's previous facility. The success rate is limited, but there's hope," Sebastian finished. "There's always hope, Mr. Carter. The question is whether your father-in-law is strong enough for what would be a very intensive treatment regimen." Father-in-law. Dr. Hayes had assumed they were married, and neither Sebastian nor Scarlett had corrected her. The casual intimacy of the mistake made Scarlett's heart clench with longing for futures that still seemed impossible. "He's strong," Scarlett said firmly. "Stronger than anyone knows." Through the consultation room's glass walls, she could see her parents in the patient room beyond. Her father looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by illness and the machines that monitored his vital signs. But his eyes were alert, and when her mother held his hand, Scarlett could see the love that had sustained them through 35 years of marriage. Love that had survived her father's construction business going bankrupt. Love that had weathered her mother's miscarriages and depression. Love that was now facing its ultimate test. "I want to proceed with the treatment," Scarlett said. Dr. Hayes nodded. "The cost isn't a factor," Sebastian interrupted. "Whatever he needs, for as long as he needs it." After Dr. Hayes left to begin preparations, Scarlett and Sebastian sat in the quiet consultation room, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them like a physical presence. "Thank you," Scarlett whispered finally. "For all of this. The facility, the specialists, the hope. I can never repay you for. Don't. Sebastian's voice was sharp. Don't turn this into a debt between us. This isn't charity, Scarlett. This is what you do for family. Family. The word hit her like lightning, beautiful and terrifying in its implications. Is that what we are? She asked softly. Sebastian turned to face her fully, his green eyes serious. I'd like to be. If you'll have me. Even though your world is falling apart because of me, my world isn't falling apart. It's being rebuilt into something better. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and strong against hers. The board meeting this morning was intense. 3 investors pulled out. Vivian's father is threatening to sue for breach of contract. The tabloids are having a field day with speculation about why I ended a 3-year engagement. Scarlett's heart sank. Sebastian, I've never been happier in my life, he continued, his voice steady and sure. For the first time since I was 17 years old, I'm making decisions based on what I want rather than what I think I should want. It's terrifying and liberating and completely worth whatever it costs. What if your father could see you now? Scarlett asked impulsively. Sebastian's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features. What do you mean? You've spent 15 years building an empire to prove you're not powerless. But what if he could see you using that power to save someone's life instead of just accumulating more wealth? What if he could see you choosing love over fear? For a moment, Sebastian looked young and vulnerable, the mask of corporate invincibility slipping completely. I think he'd be proud. I know he would be. They sat in comfortable silence, watching through the glass as the medical team prepared her father for his first treatment. The sight of so many people working to save one man's life, a construction worker from Kansas whose medical bills had bankrupted his family, should have felt surreal. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. This was what love looked like when it had unlimited resources. This was what happened when someone decided that another person's life mattered more than money. There's something else, Sebastian said after a while. About us. About what happens next. Scarlett's pulse quickened. Sebastian, I know this isn't the right time or place. I know you're worried about your father and dealing with more stress than anyone should have to handle. He turned in his chair, his eyes intense. But I need you to know that I'm in this completely. Whatever comes next, your father's treatment, the media circus, rebuilding my business relationships from scratch, I want to face it together. Together, she repeated, testing the word. As partners. As equals. As whatever we decide we want to be. Sebastian's voice was steady, but she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. I love you, Scarlett. Not the idea of you, not the novelty of you, but you. Your brilliant mind and your fierce loyalty and your stubborn independence. I love that you make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. The declaration hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Scarlett knew that stepping across it would change everything. Not just for them, but for everyone their lives touched. The scandal will follow us everywhere, she said quietly. Every social event, every business deal, every public appearance. People will always whisper about the billionaire who threw away a perfect engagement for his maid. Let them whisper. Your business will suffer. My business will adapt. What if we don't work? What if this grand gesture turns out to be a mistake? Sebastian's smile was soft and sure. Then we'll have failed at something worth attempting. But I don't think we will fail, Scarlett. I think we're going to build something extraordinary together. Through the glass, her father stirred in his hospital bed, his eyes opening to find her mother's face. Even through the walls, Scarlett could see him mouth the words, I love you, and her mother's smile in response was radiant with joy and hope. 35 years of marriage. Through bankruptcy and illness and heartbreak and triumph. That was what love looked like when it refused to give up. Yes, Scarlett whispered. Sebastian's eyes widened. Yes. Yes to all of it. To us, to whatever comes next, to building something extraordinary. She stood and moved to the window, Sebastian following until they stood side by side watching her parents. My whole life, I've been afraid of taking risks that might end in failure. But watching them, seeing what they have. What do you see? I see 2 people who decided love was worth fighting for, even when the odds were terrible. Even when it meant sacrificing other things they wanted. Scarlett turned to face Sebastian, her heart full of terror and hope. I want to fight for this. For us. Whatever it costs. Sebastian's arms came around her then, strong and sure and home. As he kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise, Scarlett felt something shift inside her chest. The careful walls she'd built around her heart crumbled, leaving room for something bigger and brighter and infinitely more dangerous than safety. Love. Real, complicated, impossible love that demanded everything and promised nothing except the chance to try. Outside the consultation room, nurses moved with quiet efficiency, machines hummed their electronic prayers, and somewhere in the distance, her father began the fight of his life. But here, in Sebastian's arms, Scarlett felt like she could face anything the world threw at them, even if it broke them in the process. Because some stories, she was learning, were worth the risk of destruction if they offered even the slightest chance of happily ever after. 3 weeks later, the morning sun streamed through the hospital windows as Scarlett sat beside her father's bed, reading aloud from the Sumerian love letters she'd been translating. The experimental treatment was working, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. Each day brought small victories, clearer eyes, stronger voice, the return of her father's gentle humor. "Tell me again what that one says," he murmured, pointing to the tablet in her hands. "My beloved, though the rivers may change their course and the cities may fall to dust, my love for you remains constant as the North Star," Scarlett translated, her voice soft with wonder at words that had survived for millennia. "In this life and whatever comes after, you are my home." Her father smiled. Smart man, that Sumerian. Knew what mattered. "Yeah," Scarlett agreed, glancing through the window where Sebastian was pacing in the hallway, his phone pressed to his ear as he dealt with the latest crisis from his business empire. Some men do. The past 3 weeks had been a baptism by fire for their relationship. Sebastian had refused to leave Kansas City, conducting board meetings via video conference and flying key executives to their small city when face-to-face meetings were crucial. The media had latched onto the story with vicious delight. Billionaire's bedside vigil. Love conquers all. But at what cost? The most expensive romance in Manhattan history. Every headline was more invasive than the last, but Sebastian faced them with the same steady determination he brought to everything else. When photographers tried to sneak into the hospital, he hired security. When business partners questioned his judgment, he calmly explained his priorities. When Vivian's father sued for breach of contract, Sebastian's lawyers dealt with it so efficiently that the case was settled within a week. "He's good for you," her father said, following her gaze to where Sebastian gestured animatedly during his call. "Reminds me of myself when I was young and thought I could move mountains for your mother. You did move mountains for her. You're still doing it." Her father's laugh was weak but genuine. "Maybe. But that young man out there? He's not just moving mountains, sweetheart. He's rebuilding the whole landscape." Through the window, Scarlett watched Sebastian end his call and turned toward the room. When he saw her looking, his serious expression transformed into a smile that made her heart skip beats. 3 weeks of crisis management and sleepless nights hadn't dimmed the intensity in his green eyes, or the way he looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. "The treatment's working," her father continued. "I'll be around to walk you down the aisle when the time comes." "Dad, I know young love when I see it, Charlotte. Hell, I lived it. Your mother and I were married 6 months after we met, and everyone said we were crazy." He squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Sometimes crazy is just another word for brave." Sebastian entered the room then, his hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it. A habit Scarlett had learned meant he was dealing with particularly challenging negotiations. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Everhart?" Sebastian asked, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "Like a man who's going to live to see his daughter happy," her father replied with a knowing smile. "And you? How's the empire business?" Sebastian's laugh was rueful. "Expensive, but stable. We lost the Pemberton Industries account this morning, Vivian's family's final act of revenge, but gained 3 new clients who apparently admire authentic leadership in the face of adversity." He made air quotes around the phrase. "Their words, not mine." "And what do you call it?" Scarlett asked. "Choosing what matters over what's expected." Sebastian's eyes found hers. "Best decision I've ever made." Scarlett's mother appeared in the doorway then, carrying coffee and wearing the first genuine smile Scarlett had seen from her in months. "The doctor wants to see us," she announced. "All of us. She says she has news." 20 minutes later, they sat in Dr. Hayes's office, watching the oncologist review scan results with an expression that was carefully professional but couldn't quite hide her excitement. "The tumors have shrunk by 60%, Dr. Hayes announced. "The immunotherapy is working better than we dared hope. Mr. Everhart, If this progress continues, you're looking at full remission within 6 months." The words hit the room like a bomb of pure joy. Scarlett's mother burst into tears, her father laughed with relief, and Sebastian's hand found Scarlett's, squeezing tight as if anchoring her to earth. "Full remission," Scarlett whispered, the words almost too big to believe. "We'll continue the treatment protocol, of course, with regular monitoring. But yes, Mr. Everhart, it looks like you're going to beat this thing." The celebration that followed was subdued but profound. The quiet joy of a family that had stared death in the face and watched it blink first. Sebastian insisted on taking them all to dinner at the best restaurant in Kansas City, where he charmed Scarlett's parents with stories about her translations and made them laugh with his self-deprecating humor about learning to navigate scandal. "You know," her mother said as they waited for dessert, "when Charlotte was little, she used to say she wanted to marry a prince." "Mom," Scarlett protested, heat creeping up her neck. "Not a king, mind you. A prince. Someone who was powerful enough to protect what he loved but hadn't forgotten how to be human." Her mother's eyes twinkled as she looked at Sebastian. "I think she found what she was looking for." Sebastian's smile was soft and genuine. "I think I'm the one who found what I was looking for, Mrs. Everhart." Later that night, they walked through the hospital gardens under a sky full of stars, the weight of good news and impossible love making everything feel surreal and perfect. "So," Sebastian said as they stopped beside a fountain that sparkled in the moonlight, "your father's going to live, my business is adapting to my new priorities, and the worst of the media circus seems to be dying down. What do you think comes next?" Scarlett considered the question seriously. A month ago, her life had been about survival. Scrubbing floors to pay medical bills, hiding her true identity, dreaming of futures that seemed impossible. Now, she stood in a garden with a man who'd risked everything for love, her father was beating cancer, and the world stretched ahead of them full of possibilities she'd never dared imagine. "I think," she said slowly, "we go back to New York and build that new world you promised me. Together." Together. Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket, and Scarlett's heart stopped as he pulled out a small velvet box. "Sebastian, I know it's fast. I know we've been dealing with crisis after crisis, and this might not be the right time." He dropped to one knee beside the fountain, his green eyes blazing with love and determination. "But I also know that life is fragile and love is rare, and I don't want to waste another day pretending I can live without you." He opened the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away, a brilliant diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the moonlight like captured stars. Scarlett O'Hara Everhart, brilliant translator of ancient love letters, brave enough to risk everything for the people you love. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that fairy tales can come true when two people are stubborn enough to fight for them? The question hung in the night air, beautiful and terrifying and absolutely perfect. Scarlett looked down at this man who'd turned his world upside down for her, who'd fought battles against business partners and social expectations and the weight of tradition itself, all because he believed in the possibility of love. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Sebastian Carter. I'll marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Scarlett felt like she was living inside one of the ancient love letters she'd spent her life translating. A story that would survive whatever storms the world sent their way. Because some loves, she'd learned, were strong enough to build empires. And some empires were worth building on nothing more solid than trust, hope, and the fierce determination to write their own ending. 6 months later, the morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of golden sunshine that made everything look like it had been touched by magic. Scarlett stood at the window of the bridal suite in Sebastian's, their estate, watching the preparations unfold on the lawn below. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, an arch of flowers that would frame their vows, and enough elegance to satisfy even Manhattan's most demanding social critics. But it was the smaller details that made her smile. The Sumerian blessing written in cuneiform on their program covers, the ancient symbols for eternal love worked into the flower arrangements, and the fact that her father would indeed walk her down the aisle, healthy and strong and radiating joy. "You look like a woman who's about to get everything she ever wanted," her mother said, appearing beside her with a steaming cup of coffee. "I look like a woman who's about to marry the love of her life in front of 300 people who spent 6 months convinced we were both insane," Scarlett corrected, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And now," Scarlett gestured toward the lawn, where she could see Sebastian directing the florists with the same focused intensity he brought to billion-dollar deals. He'd insisted on being involved in every detail of the wedding planning, claiming that after years of letting other people make decisions about his personal life, he wanted this day to be perfect. "Now they're convinced we're crazy like foxes," she said with a laugh. "Half the business journals are calling our relationship the most successful merger of the decade, and the other half are analyzing it as a case study in strategic risk-taking." "And what do you call it?" Scarlett watched Sebastian laugh at something the florist said, his formal demeanor softening into the easy humor she'd fallen in love with. 6 months of navigating scandal and rebuilding business relationships had only made him stronger, more confident in his choices. "I call it coming home," she said softly. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change and challenge and unexpected joy. Sebastian's business had indeed survived the scandal, emerging leaner but stronger as he attracted clients and partners who valued authenticity over tradition. Scarlett had returned to academia as a consulting professor at Columbia, teaching graduate courses in ancient languages while continuing her translation work for Sebastian's collection. They'd appeared on magazine covers and talk shows, telling their story with honest humor and refusing to apologize for choosing love over convenience. The media had eventually moved on to other scandals, but not before their romance had inspired countless articles about modern relationships and the courage to follow your heart. "5 minutes, Dr. Everhart," the wedding coordinator announced from the doorway. "Your father's waiting downstairs." Scarlett turned from the window, smoothing down the ivory silk of her dress, a creation that somehow managed to be both elegantly traditional and uniquely her own. The bodice was embroidered with tiny symbols from various ancient languages, all of them meaning beloved or eternal or home. "Ready?" her mother asked, adjusting Scarlett's veil with gentle hands. "Ready." They made their way downstairs, where her father waited in the foyer, handsome in his tuxedo and glowing with health that still felt miraculous. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone dared hope. Full remission achieved 2 months ahead of schedule, with every scan showing no trace of cancer. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, offering his arm. "Just like your mother on our wedding day." "Nervous?" she asked as they took their positions at the back of the aisle. "Excited," he corrected. "I get to watch my daughter marry a man who loves her enough to turn his world upside down for her. That's not nervous territory, that's gratitude territory." The music began, not traditional wedding marches, but something Sebastian had commissioned that wove together melodies from around the world, representing the universal language of love. As the doors opened and Scarlett stepped into the sunlight, she saw their guests rising to their feet. Family, friends, business colleagues who'd become genuine allies, and even a few people who'd started as critics but ended as supporters. But her eyes went immediately to Sebastian, standing at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair gleaming in the sunshine and his green eyes blazing with love and wonder as he watched her walk toward him. The ceremony was everything they'd dreamed of, personal, meaningful, and infused with the joy of 2 people who'd fought for their right to be together. They'd written their own vows, speaking words of love and commitment that made half the audience weep and the other half cheer. "I promise to love your brilliant mind and your stubborn heart," Sebastian said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to support your dreams and share your adventures and remind you every day that you are worth more than empires." "I promise to see past your walls to the man you really are," Scarlett replied, her own voice strong despite the tears in her eyes. "I promise to challenge you and comfort you and build something beautiful with you that will last longer than ancient civilizations." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Sebastian's kiss was soft and sure and full of promise for all the years ahead. The crowd erupted in applause and celebration, but for a moment, Scarlett felt like they were the only 2 people in the world. "Hello, Mrs. Carter," Sebastian murmured against her lips. "Hello, husband," she replied, testing out the words that felt both new and ancient, like they'd been waiting her whole life to say them. The reception was a perfect blend of elegance and joy, with toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious and dancing that lasted until the stars came out. Scarlett danced with her father, with Sebastian's business partners, with the wedding coordinator who'd become a friend, and most of all with her husband, who spun her around the dance floor like they were the only couple who'd ever discovered the magic of moving together in perfect harmony. "So," Sebastian said as they swayed to a slow song near midnight, most of their guests having departed for home, "how does it feel to be married to Manhattan's most notorious romantic?" Like the best adventure I've ever signed up for, Scarlett replied honestly. Though I have to ask, what's next? We've survived scandal, business upheaval, media circuses, and family medical crises. What could possibly challenge us now? Sebastian's smile was mysterious and full of mischief. Well, Mrs. Carter, I was thinking we might try building that family we talked about. Maybe fill some of those empty bedrooms upstairs with little voices that speak ancient languages and ask impossible questions. Scarlett's heart skipped. Sebastian Carter, are you suggesting we have children? I'm suggesting we have everything, Scarlett. Love, family, adventure. The kind of life that makes all those ancient love letters seem like rough drafts for what we're going to build together. As he spun her under the stars, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect wedding and the promise of their future, Scarlett thought about all the impossible things that had led them to this moment. A joke about translation that had become a love story. A maid's secret that had become the foundation of a partnership. A billionaire's walls that had become windows to forever. I love you, she whispered against his ear as the last song of the evening played, and their closest family members watched from nearby tables with satisfied smiles. I love you too, Sebastian replied. For all the years we have and all the stories we'll write together. And as they danced beneath the stars, Scarlett couldn't help thinking that some fairy tales were worth every impossible moment it took to make them real. Because in the end, the best love stories weren't the ones that came easily. They were the ones that demanded everything and gave back even more. 1 year later, Dr. Scarlett Carter stood in her office at the Carter Institute for Ancient Studies, watching through the window as construction workers put the finishing touches on the new wing that would house their expanded collection of Mesopotamian artifacts. The institute had become one of the most prestigious research centers in the world, attracting scholars and students from every continent. The new tablets arrived from the British Museum, her research assistant announced from the doorway. They're incredible, 3rd Dynasty Sumerian, just like you predicted. Scarlett smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on the gentle curve of her growing belly. Schedule a team meeting for Monday. We'll want to photograph in. Schedule a team meeting for Monday. We'll want to photograph and catalog everything before Dr. Harrison arrives from the Whitney. As her assistant left, Sebastian appeared in the doorway, his suit slightly rumpled from a day of meetings, but his eyes bright with the kind of contentment that had become his permanent expression over the past year. How are my 2 favorite people? He asked, crossing the room to wrap his arms around her from behind, his hands joining hers on her belly. Your daughter is being particularly active today, Scarlett said, leaning back against his chest. I think she's excited about the new artifacts. Already following in her mother's footsteps. Sebastian's voice was warm with pride and wonder. Though at this rate, she might be born speaking ancient Sumerian. They stood together watching the construction workers, and Scarlett marveled at how much their world had expanded since that morning when she'd whispered a translation that changed everything. The institute bore Sebastian's name, but was entirely her vision. A place where ancient wisdom could be preserved and shared, where young scholars could pursue their passions without choosing between dreams and survival. Your father called, Sebastian said. The latest scans are still clear. 6 months and counting. I still can't believe it sometimes, Scarlett admitted. Everything we have now, everything we've built, it feels like living inside a story that's too good to be true. The best stories usually do. Sebastian turned her in his arms, his green eyes serious. Do you ever regret it? Giving up the quiet academic life for all this chaos and publicity and responsibility. Scarlett considered the question, looking around her office filled with priceless artifacts and cutting-edge research, then out the window at the institute that bore their family name and would outlast them both. You know what I was translating this morning? She asked instead of answering directly. Tell me. A letter from a Sumerian merchant to his wife. He'd been away on a trading expedition for 2 years, and he wrote, My beloved, I have seen wonders in distant lands and accumulated great wealth, but none of it matters without you to share it with. Come home to me, and we will build something greater than either of us could create alone. Sebastian's smile was soft and understanding. And did she? She did. The next tablet is her response. My heart, I come not for the wealth you offer, but for the dreams we can make real together. Let us build something that will last when we are dust, something worthy of the love that brought us back to each other. 4,000 years later, and they're still teaching us about what matters, Sebastian said quietly. Some lessons are eternal. Scarlett reached up to touch his face, marveling at how familiar and beloved these features had become. I don't regret anything, Sebastian. Not the scandal, not the challenges, not the reporters who still occasionally call us the most unlikely love story of the decade. Because look what we built from one impossible moment. Through the window, she could see students walking across the Institute's campus, young people from around the world who'd come here to study humanity's oldest stories. In the distance, their house, the estate where it all began, stood against the sky like a castle from a fairy tale. Besides, she added with a grin, someone has to make sure you don't buy any more ancient artifacts without proper authentication. Your collection was getting embarrassingly inaccurate before I came along. Sebastian laughed, the sound rich and warm and completely free of the careful control that had once defined him. My collection, Mrs. Carter, is now the finest in the world thanks to my brilliant wife. Though I suspect our daughter might have other ideas about what to do with 4,000-year-old love letters. She'll probably want to update them with modern technology. My beloved, your Instagram post from the marketplace made my heart sing like temple bells. God help us all if she inherits your intelligence and my stubbornness. She'll change the world, Scarlett said with certainty. Just like her parents did. As if summoned by their conversation, Scarlett's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Dinner Sunday? Your father wants to show Sebastian his latest construction project. He's building a treehouse for his future granddaughter. My dad's building a treehouse, Scarlett announced, showing Sebastian the message. Of course he is. A man who beat cancer gets to spoil his granddaughter however he wants. Sebastian's expression grew thoughtful. You know, I've been thinking about legacy lately. About what we want to leave behind. The Institute will outlast us by centuries. I'm not talking about buildings or endowments. Sebastian's hands moved to frame her face, his touch gentle and reverent. I'm talking about the story we're writing together. About teaching our daughter that love isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you choose every day, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult, Scarlett agreed. Exactly. Sebastian's kiss was soft and sure, full of promises for all the years ahead. I want her to know that her parents were brave enough to risk everything for something real. That they built an empire on nothing more solid than trust, and chose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. As the sun set over their institute, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Scarlett thought about all the ancient love letters she'd translated over the years. Stories of passion that had survived empires, declarations of devotion that had outlasted dynasties, promises of forever that had proven stronger than time itself. She and Sebastian were adding their own chapter to that eternal story now, a modern fairy tale about a billionaire and a maid who discovered that some transformations were worth any price, some risks were worth taking, and some love stories were strong enough to rewrite the rules of what was possible. Come on, Sebastian said, taking her hand. Let's go home. I'll make dinner while you put your feet up and tell our daughter about the ancient civilizations she's going to help discover someday. And after dinner? After dinner, we'll plan tomorrow's adventures. Because Mrs. Carter, our story is just getting started. As they walked together toward the car, Scarlett's hand in Sebastian's, she felt the weight of their wedding rings and the promise of their future, and the tiny life growing inside her who would carry their love into tomorrow. Some fairy tales, she'd learned, weren't about finding Prince Charming or living happily ever after in some distant kingdom. The best fairy tales were about two people brave enough to build their own kingdom, one impossible moment at a time, and fill it with enough love to last forever. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave and very stubborn about believing in magic, those fairy tales came true in ways more beautiful than any ancient storyteller had ever dared imagine. Wasn't that absolutely incredible? A love story that proves fairy tales can come true when two people are brave enough to fight for them. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me, what would you risk everything for? What's your own translate this and the house is yours moment? And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because stories like this are exactly why we're here together, sharing these beautiful journeys of the heart. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep fighting for your dreams, and remember, sometimes the most impossible stories are the ones most worth telling.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and more intriguing than you can ever imagine.